weather alert. Florida now in recovery mode after Hurricane Milton ripped across the state as a hurricane the whole way. Florida has been dealing with a property insurance crisis for years. How many of those destroyed buildings and vehicles are insured? Florida Chief Financial Officer Jimmy Patronis joins us right now. Jimmy, good morning to you from Orlando.
Good to see you.
Okay, so I know you've been out looking at the storm damage, and yesterday you came in contact with a guy, lost everything, has no insurance. What does he do?
You know, it was heartbroken. He was probably about 70. He was living next to a woman who was in her 80s, and they became neighbors, and he became her caregiver. He's right now actually living with her. Her house was untouched. His was destroyed. But as I was talking to him, he had no insurance. Primary income was Social Security. This was a gated retirement community. So he's going to be a candidate for the trailer program that Governor DeSantis has fired up at the Hope website. And then there'll be FEMA support for him. So there'll be some money that he'll be able to go through there. But it's unfortunately, you know, and he told me, he says, he started crying. He said, Jimmy, he says, this isn't your fault. He says, these are my own bad decisions. I should have prepared better for this. Could have happened in my life later, and it has.
Well, you know, Jimmy, the problem is hurricane insurance in Florida is a fortune. It has tripled, it's quadrupled, it's quintupled in some cases. And I know, and we were talking to the lieutenant governor yesterday about how you guys are trying to stabilize it. For the people looking in, if they've paid off their mortgage, they don't need to have it as a requirement for the mortgage. But why should they have it if it just straps them to the point where I'm going to have to go without something else?
Sure, and that has happened. But what we have seen is we had a man-made problem we had to fix in Florida. And I told people, you got to give us 12 to 18 months to correct it. Well, we're 18 months after that. The rates in Florida are going down, okay? But they're going down single digit, not double digit. They're not going down fast enough for me. But when you have huge loss runs like you had with a Hurricane Ian, unfortunately, that has a massive impact to the financials of these companies.
And excellent question. I know that a number of insurers have left Florida. I know you're trying hard to get more insurers back. Two back-to-back big storms like we've just had down in Florida. Do you think more companies are going to pull out before more companies come back?
Well, this year we had 9 new companies, recapitalized companies, new companies come into the state of Florida. We have made Florida an attractive place to invest money again when it comes to the insurance market, but it doesn't happen overnight. I'm still very bullish on Florida, and as I have seen after every single storm, you'll have those that will cash out and leave, and it's amazing how long the line is of people that are glad to buy that house on the water, build it up to the newest building codes, and want to live in paradise.
Indeed, and it is paradise. Jimmy Patronis, we thank you very much for joining us live from Orlando. We know you got your hands full down there. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Steve.
All right. 6:32 now here in New York City. Kamala Harris taking questions from Latino voters last night, but can she answer for their fears over her candidacy? Her response went something like this.
I'm also concerned about the way I feel President Biden was pushed aside.
Oh.
Is how can you clarify this whole process and how you were elected?
President Biden made a decision that I think history will show was probably one of the most courageous that a president could make, which is he decided to put country above his personal interest. And he made that decision. He within that same period of time, supported my candidacy and urged me to run.
She was never primaried. This, as recent reporting reveals, Democrats fear her media blitz and major ad buys aren't doing much to win favor with the voters. Here to react is townhall.com editor and Fox News contributor, Katie Pavlich. Hey, Katie.
Good morning, Ainsley.
Good morning. Good to see you. I love that question. No one's asked her that question. I mean, we've all been saying she was never primaried, but she didn't even answer the question. And then when she did, she talked to, I mean, she wasn't, no one has ever voted for her. She is the luckiest candidate ever. She's gotten this far without anyone having to cast a vote.
Yeah, she ran for president the first time. The 2020 presidential cycle had to drop out before a single vote was cast in that Democratic primary because she was too far to the left, even for Democrats. And so now she was basically installed after President Joe Biden was pushed out of the race. I know that there in her answer, she again repeated this narrative and this lie that he somehow was courageous and made this decision on behalf of the country. Up until the moment that he put that letter out on X, that he was not interested in leaving the race. He was pushed out by people like former President Barack Obama, by former Speaker Nancy Pelosi. They have not spoken to each other since Joe Biden was taken out of the race. And now there are a number of voters who are skeptical of this process, of her not being tested, of her not going through the rigorous process of answering a number of questions about who she is and what her policies would be as president. And as we've seen, she hasn't been on the campaign trail as much as Donald Trump. She has not been doing as many interviews, and she's been doing half the number of events. And in the meantime, she's on all of these friendly media outlets, not answering questions about policy, but about silly things that people aren't interested when it comes to lowering their prices, healthcare, many of the issues that were brought up in that campaign or in that town hall last night.
Yeah, I mean, Axios has a piece about how all these media interviews that are with very friendly outlets, The View, Stephen Colbert, Howard Stern, they're all voting for her. They're already in her camp. Didn't ask any tough questions. That it's not even moving the needle. And look at this poll. This is the latest Wall Street Journal poll in Nevada. It has Trump up 49% to Harris's 43%. Is that because of the Hispanic vote there, or is it because he was the first to say no tax on tips, Katie?
Well, that's a big jump, a big lead for the former president. The Trump campaign also came out with some internal polling yesterday showing the president up by 3 in Nevada. And Nevada is the place in August where President Trump introduced the no tax on tips policy position, which then Kamala Harris decided to copy. Now, the culinary union there has endorsed Kamala Harris, but the campaign is very worried about the rank and file workers voting for former President Donald Trump. And the bottom line is at this point in the race, we have 25 days to go to Election Day, if you can believe that. Totally crazy. The President Trump is campaigning like he's winning. And the Harris campaign is campaigning like they're scared, like they're losing. And based on the interviews that she's done this week, based on the problems that they're having with Hispanic male voters, and the comments from former President Barack Obama telling black men that they need to come out and vote for Kamala Harris because they don't have the votes to win, tells me that she hasn't been able to keep that coalition together and that she's still trying to get people in the base to come out and vote for her. That's not a good place for her to be just 3 weeks, 4 weeks out from the election.
You're right. Can you believe we are so close? Thank you so much, Katie.
I cannot believe it.
I know.
Almost there.
I know. Thank you. Great to see you. It is the party that cried misinformation. What really happened with the Biden-Harris hurricane response and why they refused to accept any criticism. That's next.
On the line, people are in desperate situations. Have the decency to tell them the truth, despite the misinformation and lies. The truth is, we're providing the resources needed to rescue, recover, and rebuild.
Really? Now, as the Biden administration continues to condemn criticism of their disaster response to the first hurricane, let's take a look at how they, in my view, mismanaged Hurricane Helene and tried to make up for it late and tried to make up for it with this last one, Milton. First off, let's look back. On Thursday, the hurricane hits landfall. Where's the President of the United States? In Rehoboth Beach. You would think at the very least, knowing what he knows about the weather and the potential impact, he'd say, I better stay at the White House, especially he's been doing this for 50 years. Optics does indeed matter. We don't hear anything except on Monday, Donald Trump shows up in Georgia and he says, hey, this is Samaritan's Purse. This is what I'm doing with Starlink. This is how I'm trying to help. No sign of help from FEMA at that point. Then Mayorkas comes out and says, hey, it's a big hurricane, especially in western North Carolina. These people are suffering. And although I'm 8 days into the fiscal year, I'm out of money. I'm going to need more money. That's what started the talk of how is FEMA out of money. Then Biden, Harris realize how bad it is. They start visiting South Carolina, North Carolina. They start going to Virginia and Georgia and getting people what they want. What they didn't do is call the military. What they didn't do is get enough choppers in the air. What they didn't do is work with the private sector to get people out of the mountains, which not many people thought they'd have to deal with. There's always surprises with a natural disaster. I get it. But the lack of ability to adjust on the fly is noteworthy. Then Joe Biden goes there and starts talking about misinformation again. And then we hear about Joe Biden talking about the cost of the hurricane, what it will be, and what he's willing to give, especially to the people of North Carolina, which happens to be a battleground state as well as Georgia. And then we find out that the vice president is promising $100 million in tweets that come out. And she puts out these tweets back to back. Get this. Today I announced that the Biden-Harris administration will provide $100 million for I-40 repair in Western and North Carolina. Then she tweets out right after, I'm concerned about the security and well-being of civilians suffering in Lebanon. Really? Controlled by Hezbollah, by the way. I'm giving them $157 million. How do you think that looks? Who actually authored that tweet? Then you wonder why people get outraged and they say, why are you giving money there? And why is FEMA out of money when we give so much to illegal immigrants? This is the exchange I want you to see. And then I'm going to show you the tally of FEMA's budget. Peter Doocy goes at the press secretary asking questions about what they claim is misinformation. Watch.
If he's got money for people in Lebanon right now, without Congress having to come back, what does it say about his values? There's not enough money right now for people in North Carolina who need it. That's not misinformation.
No, the way you're asking me the question is misinformation. Yes. What you're asking me is why Congress needs to come back and do their job. That's what you're asking me. Congress needs to come back and do their job. And thanks, everybody.
It is nuts. So show the temper tantrum. Make this as much about election, in my view, as it is getting aid to people in need in battleground states. This is what's got people crazy. FEMA, you're out of money, but what are you spending it on? Illegal immigrants, everything they need, $1.4 billion. What are you spending on? COVID-19. You know what I got yesterday in the mail? 2 COVID tests. I don't want them. Who's paying for that? And over here, we talk about what they've spent so far, $344 million. $31 billion total budget. So can you move money around? We've seen it before. And would that be able to solve the problems? Who brought up the money problems? It was Mayorkas, the HHS secretary. Who brought up $750 to people in need? That was the Vice President of the United States. Where's the misinformation? We reached out to FEMA for a statement, did not hear back. We'll relay when we do. So what's the real reason why Democrats keep claiming the GOP is pushing misinformation? One of the best in the business, Matt Taibbi. You see him and read him on Substack, joins us now. Matt, what's behind this big move to talk about misinformation and blaming Donald Trump specifically for it?
Well, they keep changing the definition of misinformation and disinformation, and they have another category they call malinformation. But I think the exchange you just saw between Karine Jean-Pierre and Peter Doocy was incredibly revealing. When she identified the way he was phrasing the question as misinformation, there are actually kids' books out now about misinformation that define the asking of questions themselves as a form of misinformation. This is one of the things we found in the Twitter files, is that people who question authoritative sources, or when who don't pay attention when they surface authoritative sources, that's considered misinformative, to ignore the dictates of officials. So what she's really saying there is, you're not listening to what I'm saying. We're saying we're doing the best we can, and you're questioning that, and that's misinformation, which is crazy. Essentially, they're saying it's a lie to question the government.
It really is. And the problem is there was a lack of coordination between the people like Corey Mills with their private choppers. The Army was ready to go 4 days prior. These are legitimate questions. They waited a week to call them. When they got in, they turned the whole thing around. And those people are still suffering today, but they're focusing on Donald Trump and misinformation. And it's about the campaign, which one Joe Biden is not even in. I think he knows that well. If I can, let's talk about something different that's also causing controversy. CBS, their morning show, their host decides to take on Ta-Nehisi Coates on his anti-Israeli stance in his book. It's a fine debate. He doesn't seem upset by it. Here's a portion of it.
And it's what I struggled with throughout this book. What is it that so particularly offends you about the existence of a Jewish state that is a Jewish safe place and not any of the other states out there?
There's nothing that offends me about a Jewish state. I am offended by the idea of states built on ethnocracy, no matter where they are.
This went on for 5 minutes, and all of a sudden CBS is apologizing. They're giving special psychological treatment to the rest of the staff. He had to have a teary-eyed explanation of his series of questions. Matt, what planet are we on?
Yeah, this is the new world we live in, where when a person says something that is even a little bit off narrative, they have to, in order to stay in the good graces of mainstream media or, you know, their social circle, they have to go through these public struggle sessions. But that's an extraordinary situation, especially given what happened with 60 Minutes earlier this week, when they put out two different versions of an interview with Vice President Harris and then did not explain it to the public. And that was a major event sort of in the history of American journalism, to edit a presidential interview during a campaign. So those two things, those two episodes show that the networks are very worried about one thing, but they're not worried about traditional journalistic ethics, which is deeply concerning.
I just want to show you this real quick. Gayle King was able to ask an anti-Israeli question, had no problem. Watch this.